Information Industry. Mr. Ajay Poddar, the Chairman of the International Committee for ASEAN, East Asia and Oceania PhD Chamber. And we also thank Mr. Ajay Poddar for supporting this session as well, sir. Environics has supported this session. We are really thankful to you, sir. I also welcome our Vice President, Mr. Pradeep Multani ji, for coming to this session, and also our Secretary General, Mr. Saurabh Kangal. And I also welcome the other officials from the Indian Embassy in Japan, and also the industry members in Japan who have joined in this. So to officially start this, I will request Dr. D.K. Agarwal ji, the President PhD Chamber, to kindly give presidential address. And before he starts, I request all the participants to please keep their handsets or laptop on mute mode, and if possible, also the video off so that we can hear properly. Dr. D.K. Agarwal
Yes,
ji.
I would request.
ये वेबएक्स पे हो रही है शायद, है ना, कोई वो है, कोई इंडो जापान कोई सप्लाई
switch off your video because there is a lot of disturbance coming. If you can switch off your video, I think things would be better. Can you hear me, Naveen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Good afternoon, everyone. His Excellency Mr. Sanjay Kumar Verma, Ambassador of India to Japan, Professor Ashok Kumar Chawla, Advisor, Japan, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, my colleague Mr. Sanjay Agarwal, Senior Vice President, PhD Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Pradeep Multani, Vice President, PhD Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Ajay Poddar, Chairman, International Affairs Committee for ASEAN, East Asia and Oceania, Mr. Atul Anand, Co-Chairman, Secretary General, PhD Chamber, Mr. Naveen Seth, Principal Director, PhD Chamber of Commerce. Ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon to each one of you. With that, on behalf of PhD Chamber of Commerce and on my personal behalf, I would like to welcome His Excellency Mr. Sanjay Kumar Verma for taking out time and joining us to today's webinar. I would also like to extend a very warm welcome to Professor Ashok Kumar Chawla, who is advisor for Japan Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. Sir, if we talk about the relationship between India and Japan, I think it is a very close, very cordial, and a relationship of trust. Since the establishment of 1952, since the establishment of the diplomatic relations since 1952, our relationship is getting deeper and deeper. If I talk about in the 6th century, when the Buddhism reached to China, and it had a huge impact on the culture of Japan. And I think that is the reason that we, both the country, the people of both the country feel very close to each other. At present, 10,000 nationals, Japanese nationals, they are living in India, and around 30,000 Indians, they live in Japan. And if I talk about the businesses, almost 1,441 companies being promoted by Japanese entrepreneurs. They are in India having more than 5,000 establishments. Japan happens to be one of the top trading in the northern Eastern Asian region, and our total bilateral trade is $17.63 billion. It was in 2018-19, and now up to Jan 2020, it is around $13 billion. Not only that, Japan has invested more than $30 billion as FDI into India since 2000, which itself shows how bullish Japanese investors are for India. And the recent announcement by the Prime Minister of Japan, asking its companies to bring back the manufacturing facilities. And for that, they've given a relief package of $2.2 billion. That gives India a huge opportunity because India is a top contender for all those companies who wants to shift back from China. And in fact, after this announcement, Indian government has also become very active, and they have set up a committee of joint secretaries to see what are the roadblocks facing these setting up this manufacturing facility in India. And I'm sure that government of India will lay red carpet to ensure that most of these companies they come to India. And recently, Indian government has changed its FDI policy. It has made it the government approval compulsory for all those investments coming from countries which have land border with India. And practically, this is to ensure that Chinese investment do not come to India. If at all it comes, it has to be with the approval of government. So China was a big investor into the startup space, and I think now a void is being created. And as we all understand that the Indian startup system is the third largest startup ecosystem of the world, and there are huge opportunities. So I think that this is a big opportunity for Japanese investors, and they can fill the void. And even the Indian startup industry would welcome the investment by Japanese investors. Well, I believe that there is a huge opportunity of collaboration between India and China. If India and Japan, if Japan is strong on hardware, India is strong on software. So there could be a very good synergy, and both the like India has a stated policy of digital partnership with Japan. I think this objective can also be fulfilled in the new COVID world. And I'm sure this new COVID world, Japan is going to be a bigger and a sought after partner for India. With this, I close here. I'm sure that with the presence of Honorable Ambassador of India to Japan, we are going to get some good insight how we can get these investors, how we can get these companies which are trying to shift back their manufacturing facilities, how India can get that investment, and what all needs to be done. And in fact, PSG Chamber would be very happy to connect with these companies and also connect Indian entrepreneurs so that there could be a synergy, there could be joint ventures, and we would be very happy to provide that platform. So PSG Chamber would do everything, whatever is required to ensure that this partnership between Japan and India grows even stronger and stronger after this post-COVID world. With this, I close here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President Sir, for giving the opening remarks, setting the ball rolling. So now I would request Mr. Sanjay Agarwal, our Senior Vice President, PSG Chamber, to share his views, please.
Good afternoon, everybody, and good evening to the Honorable, to the Excellency Ambassador Sanjay Verma in Tokyo, along with his colleagues in Tokyo. Professor Ashok Kumar Chawla ji, Advisor, Japan Ministry of External Affairs. My colleague, President D.K. Agarwal ji, Senior President of PSG Chamber. Vice President Pradeep Multani ji, Chairman of the ASEAN Committee of PSG Chamber, Mr. Ajay Podar, Co-Chairs, Mr. Atul Anand and Mr. Neelab Dalmia, Secretary General, Mr. Saurabh Sanyal, officials of the Indian Embassy in Japan, senior dignitaries present here. Ladies and gentlemen, it's really a pleasure for me to be a part of this interaction with the Honorable Ambassador of India to Japan and with Professor Chawla, who are the key, I would say, players in maintaining the Indian-Japanese business relations and, of course, political relations in every manner forward in today's scenario. So I guess the relationship between India and Japan has become very, very crucial post-COVID. And and as mentioned by our president, the certain changes that have happened which nobody could have imagined earlier. These include the Japanese thinking of now exiting a large number of their companies from China, and the relocation part where India would definitely wish to be among the prime candidates. I think this is one area in which we need to work together as a both to, from the trade industry side and from the embassy side and from the MEA side, in every manner to try and see, because these are not people who don't know about our country. These are people who have been there with us for the last 50 years. They have got so many companies, more than 1,500 companies present here. Would the admin please mute others except the chief guests?
हाँ नमस्कार
GL Agrawal ji,
Please
kindly
mute.
mute your. GL Agrawal ji, please mute. And I would request all our other participants also to mute. There's a lot of disturbance coming.
So I guess the times are crucial, and we as PSG Chamber would be very, very happy to associate and involve ourselves in every possible manner in supporting the trade and industry wishing to, from Japan, wishing to enter India. I guess what we would really look forward to now in this interactive seminar is to hear the views of Excellency Mr. Sanjay Verma and Professor Chavla about what are the prospects and how they see the relations developing, and also hopefully some of the interactions from our members present here and the views of our chair and co-chair of the Indo-ASEAN Committee. I again welcome you all and look forward to the very positive interaction. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Senior Vice President, sir. Now I would request Mr. Ajay Poddar, the Chairman for the International Affairs Committee of ASEAN, East Asia and Oceania for the PSG Chamber of Commerce and Industry, to share his views on India-Japan trade relations and the way forward. Mr. Ajay Poddar, please.
Thank you, Excellency Verma. Hearty welcome. We look forward to your sharing your views and our experiencing your wisdom. Hearty welcome also to Sri Chavla and Sri Agarwal, President, Sanjay Agarwal ji, Senior Vice President, and Sri Pradeep Multani, Vice President. My co-chairs, Mr. Atul Anand, Nilab Dalmia, the Director General, Mr. Saurabh Sanyal of PhD CCI, other members of PhD CCI, delegates from Japan, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure that with the advice from Sri Chavla and Sri Verma, we will be able to understand how to do business with Japan better. The friendship between India and Japan, for the sake of brevity, I'm not going to repeat any of the things which our president covered. We've had a long, starting from the visit of Bodhisena in 1752 AD to Japan, and followed by, of course, Guru Rabindranath Tagore, Swami Vivekanand, Sri Tata, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, so many other people. We've had later during the during the intervention, I've requested a very eminent historian, Mr. Binoy Behel, who's a good friend and highly regarded in Japan, to share his views, and I think they'll be very useful. You would be surprised to know that the maximum number of Saraswati temples anywhere in the world is in Japan. And all Japan scriptures, all what they chant in their temples and everywhere else, is all written in Sanskrit, though many Japanese may not know. So Japan is a key partner in our transformation. We have more than 1,500 Japanese companies operating in India and more than 100 operating Indian companies operating in Japan. India's primary exports have been, of course, petroleum products, chemicals, compounds, metallic mineral ware, fish, ores, scrap, clothing, a lot iron and steel products, textiles, and a lot of things. We have had a long history of dealing with Japan. We used to own iron ore and manganese mines, and we have exported a lot of iron ore and manganese to Japan, as well as traded with them on a lot of things, companies like Mitsui and Mitsubishi. India's imports from Japan are machinery, iron and steel products, plastics, non-ferrous, motor vehicles, organic chemicals, manufacture. Indian companies are investing in energy, mineral exploration, agro-processing. So the list is long. I want most of you know this thing. As you know, Japan is now amongst the major investors. I think it's the third major investor in India. And I think that the potential, I just want to share a few things because people want to know. I've had a collaboration, a joint venture with a Japanese company, and I've had trading. So I want to share 2-3 things. One is Japan is the only country in the world which operates on honor and shame. The rest of the world operates on right and wrong. But so it's important for us if we want to do with business with Japanese to understand how Japanese think and what they expect from us as a behavior. They are very long-term and durable partners. They take a long time in deciding on a partnership. They do a lot of due diligence. But once they've partnered with you, some of the relationships are lifelong. So anybody who's looking at Japan must not look at short-term relationships. It must look at long-term durable relationships. And they are great admirers of Indian culture and knowledge. But in my interaction with a lot of Japanese, they feel that though we have a very rich culture, very rich tradition, very rich knowledge, but many Indians are not very cultured. So it's something which we must be a little aware of. And the other thing which I want to highlight is they are very transparent in their dealings. So if you are amongst themselves, they'll keep discussing costs. And if you understand their language and you tell them that this is the cost and you said 20% margin, they will agree to that. So there are many qualities and there are many things we can learn from them. And I think I'll end here. I think with our relationship in defense, in security, in the kind of political goodwill that we already have, I think the sky is the limit and we must engage more diligently to make this partnership work. We can't take it for granted that because they're drawing from China, they will come to India. As recently we found out that out of 56 companies which have exited China, 26 have gone to Vietnam and many have gone to Taiwan. So we will have to make it attractive for them to come here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman Sir, for touching the specific points and being very brief on this. We once again thank you for supporting this event, sir. Now I request Professor Ashok Kumar Chawla ji, who is the advisor Japan in the East Asia Division of the Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, as he will be giving us a lot of insight about the current situation, also the past we have the trade with Japan, and also we are sure that he will be advising us on a lot of things, how we can take this further. Professor Chawla, please.
Thank you so much. President Mr. Agarwal, Chairman International Affairs Committee Mr. Podhar, Senior Vice President Mr. Agarwal, Mr. Pradeep Multani, Vice President, and Mr. Naveen Seth, my respected Ambassador, sir, my DCM, Mr. Raj Srivastava, and other colleagues and friends. Let me give you a brief about the overall India-Japan relationship and how it's working here. My ambassador will be talking in more details about what exactly needs to be done. and I think he'll be giving great hints. Already a tone has been set, so it's easier for me to do my job now. The India-Japan relationship or bilateral relationship have made a lot of advancements in last 6 years. Due to the consistent effort of the Indian government, we have witnessed foreign direct investment to the tune of 12.473 billion US dollars during a period beginning April 14 till December 2019. And Japan has emerged the third largest foreign investor in India in terms of cumulative FDI inflows. Compared to Japan's investment in China or Southeast Asia, there is a scope for a lot of expansion of Japanese presence in India. There are many potential areas besides the conventional auto sector or white goods sectors. These include food processing, instrumentation, robotics, steel, and electronic manufacturing. Politically, Japan remains one of the key foreign policy priority for India, and strengthening India's economic relationship with Japan continues to remain the area of focus for us. This is evident during the India-Japan annual summits, where B2B events have emerged as one of the highlights of the summit. The 2018 annual summit held in Tokyo, witnessed letter of intents and acknowledgements of private sector investment. The proposals were worth proposals from some 57 Japanese companies to make an investment in India worth $3 billion US. However, the challenge remains to fast track the Japanese commitments to actual progress on the ground. It has been the consistent endeavor of Government of India to provide a comfortable ecosystem to Japanese companies to come to India and establish their businesses. A Japan-India roadmap for investment promotion was drawn in 2017, which involved steps like facilitation of investment promotion activities through Invest India here in New Delhi and our embassy in Tokyo, opening of JETRO's business support centers, opening of Japan industrial townships, human resource development through Japan-India Institute for Manufacturing, Japan endowment courses, and Japanese language education in India. There also has been endeavor for utilizing Japanese ODA for critical infrastructure development and capitalize on the infrastructure projects as a force multiplier. Japanese projects like the Delhi Metro and other mass rapid transport systems in Bangalore, Ahmedabad, and Chennai, Western Dedicated Freight Corridor, Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, etc., are the good examples. Other than the conventional area of infrastructure modernization, there has been a lot of interest in the domain of startups. According to reports, SoftBank has invested more than USD 10 billion in Indian startups. According to reports, these reports need to be confirmed, but the figures are something like that. The two governments are supporting the digital cooperation by building a robust digital partnership that focuses on new and advanced technologies, 5G, and artificial intelligence. I'm very confident that the India-Japan digital partnership will become an important facet of our vibrant bilateral relationship. India and Japan also have robust platform which links India's Ayushman Bharat and Japan's AHVIN, that is Asia Wellbeing and Health Initiative for promoting health cooperation. The current COVID-19 crises have brought out the importance of having secure and stable supply lines of critical medical and other equipment. Through partnership in research and scaling models of medical equipment suited for the large Indian market, there is also an opportunity at hand. Now, as both countries grapple with the fallout of the COVID-19 on the global economy, India and Japan can help each other in fueling growth of each other's economies. As Japan looks for indigenizing and diversifying its global supply chains, India should figure prominently in the Japanese radar as an attractive destination. The government, just a second. The government and private sector should collectively look at opportunities to bring Japanese investment into India and create sustainable partnerships. Only a few months back, we have been doing groundwork for the summit meeting between the two prime ministers, and the precautionary measures of lockdown and and suspension of international flights because of COVID-19 were beyond anybody's imagination. Many Japanese nationals have gone back to Japan, and while they are doing work from their homes, I think we all know there is a loss of momentum because of this reason. We have already started brainstorming with our Japanese counterparts to see how to facilitate restart of businesses once the lockdown is gradually eased. I believe the Japanese companies such as Suzuki, Honda, Toyota, Denso, and others would be very keen to join this process. While Japanese companies are benefiting from India's strategic location and utilizing India as a resource base, India offers a huge domestic market to Japanese companies to cater to. And post-COVID, this domestic demand is expected to rise. To my all participants of the webinar today, I'm sure you might be interested in ways and means for tying up or doing business with Japanese companies. Some hints were thrown by my senior friend a while ago, how to do business with Japanese companies. He has hinted very correctly the trust which you need to build. In this context, let me give you a brief about the base that has been created by the two sides, that is India and Japan, and what all is expected. The basic principle continues to remain: business has to be sustainable. And one major factor, what we call in Indian scenario, padta nahi hai or padta nahi khata hai. This has an exact equivalent in Japanese business word. It is called saisan awanai. So something which doesn't fit well from business economics, it doesn't fit well in Japanese and Indian environment in the same manner. Sometimes you do business even when padta nahi khata hai, but there is always a valid justification, and that has to work. Otherwise, it leads to bankruptcy. I think if you keep these things in your mind, then comes the next important factors, which are deeper understanding of the resources in the market, localization, compatibility, comfort, or ease of doing business, etc. You will recall British Raj or East India Company went deep into difficult terrains all over India and mined gold centuries ago. Tata established base in Jharkhand with coal mine over a century ago. Jharkhand even now is a difficult terrain. In other words, compatibility and ease of doing business are important, but focus has to be on the basics first. So what we have done so far, if you see the MEA homepage or even our web page of Embassy of India in Japan, you'll find the vision statement which was signed between India and Japan, and the fact sheets which were released. There are 12 fact sheets which cover the areas such as Indo-Pacific cooperation, including in Africa, Act East Forum, ODA, railways, Make in India, skill development, food processing, security, defense, disaster risk reduction, science and digital, and language. It provides very wide spectrum and an institutionalized mechanism to carry out the business between India and Japan. There are 12 Japan-India townships in different stages of development, which provide attractive facilities and incentives to the Japanese ventures or Japanese joint ventures. Mechanisms of Japan-India Institute of Manufacturing, that is JIM, and Japanese endowed courses, JEC, also aims at providing a ready workforce who are attuned to Japanese style manufacturing and management practices, and the keywords or key working methods such as 5S and Gemba Kaizen. At present, 12 gyms have been operationalized by top-ranking Japanese companies operating in India, such as Daikin, Yamaha, Toyota, Hitachi, Suzuki, etc., in a number of Indian states, and has trained close to 1,200 people. I'm mentioning specifically gyms here because Japanese people want the workforce which is trained as per their requirement, and they always complain that they don't find such manpower. So they were requested to train manpower as per their requirement on their own. This is how gyms came into existence. We have been training our existing as well as new teachers through the Japanese language teachers training program. So far, more than 400 teachers have already undergone different categories of training programs successfully, and they are available for teaching Japanese language to augment the supply of suitable bilingual resources. India-Japan Act East Forum pools and streamlines the efforts for the development of India's Northeast. This provides huge business opportunities to both Indian as well as Japanese businesses. This forum is directing the bilateral efforts to develop India's Northeast as the gateway to Southeast Asia. Major connectivity projects through Japanese ODA in the Northeast provide enabling infrastructure for the companies to set base there. There's a proposal to set up one more industrial township in the north, which will further create attractive environment for the Japanese industries, including the joint ventures with the Japanese industries. I believe that the platform is ready for Japanese companies to come to India and kickstart their businesses or expand their businesses here, including through the joint ventures. As I mentioned, Indian business will have to look internally. Are we really geared to welcome the Japanese business? This has been mentioned also, so it's easier for me to convince you all. There is a word called ukezara, which I mention very often. It means receptacle, that are we ready to receive the Japanese investment, Japanese technology, or the Japanese people? This means offering the services or your contribution to the extent it is desired, in the manner it is desired, and if possible, in the language and style it is desired. You all know that the Japanese do everything in a systematic manner. Just you need to keep in mind, they follow 5S and Gemba Kaizen in their day-to-day life, the way we follow yoga or our own such similar activities. TPM they follow to resolve issues related to industry, more specifically to the manufacturing industry. And TQM for building total quality in whatever they do. This whatever would mean manufacturing as well as management and even running the offices. So these concepts appear sometimes very simple, sometimes very complex, depending on the perception or depending upon how you look at these concepts. But these are all practice-based and not theory-based concepts. And all these concepts call for continuous involvement practically. If I take the example of MSME, there are commonalities between the two sides. We have broadly two categories of MSMEs. One is I call Chalta Hai or Jugadu category, and the other, which is a traditional work, is worship-based category. I think the second category is quite same or quite similar to the concept of MSME in Japan. A tradition from father to the son or guru to the shishya, or sometimes not to a person who is not related at all. This has been a tradition in Japan for very long, and this has been a tradition in India also in some way. So I think the second category can match the Japanese MSc mindset just by adopting Japanese techniques of anything and everything based on use of SOP, then benchmarking, then doing the Kaizen, and then revising the SOP, and the cycle rotates. And has, in a situation like COVID-19, Badu came to help at many places. So this also has a huge scope, provided there's a will to adapt to the new ways wholeheartedly. What it means for India's private sector, it should look at building trust and key partnerships, and the keywords are adopt and then adapt. And this should go first. Very soon it will be your turn to add value to the overall system. I would like to finish here. I've taken probably longer than the allotted time. Thank you so much for listening to me very patiently.
Thank you very much, Professor Chawla, for giving us the detailed in-depth and also showing us the potentials which are available. We will definitely from PhD Chamber and the ASEAN Committee which we have, we will come and discuss more in detail and we'll see how we can take this further, sir. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to invite His Excellency Mr. Sanjay Kumar Verma, the Indian Ambassador to Japan, to share his views. So before he speaks, I will just give you a brief about him. Mr. Ambassador Sanjay Verma is an officer of the 1988 batch of the Indian Foreign Service. He was stationed at the Consulate General of India, Hong Kong, and the Embassy of India in China, Vietnam, and Turkey, before serving as the Consulate General of the India in Milan, Italy. And Ambassador Verma was the Indian Ambassador to the Republic of Sudan. And now he is the Indian Ambassador to Japan. And he is deeply passionate about information technology, artificial intelligence, cyber diplomacy, delivery of people-centric services using interactive technologies, guiding and facilitating small businesses and investors, etc. So over to His Excellency Mr. Verma.
Thank you very much, Mr. Agarwal, for this very kind introduction. President Shri Agarwal of the PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Poddar, Professor Chawla, thank you very much for whetting the appetite of the audience and giving them a backgrounder on Japan and setting the priorities where we should move on. I'm afraid I'll be a little bit pedestrian in my views. Ambassadors are known to be sophisticated, but I would like to digress from there. And I'll be a bit pedestrian so that I'm able to reach out to you more clearly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate 4 or 5 different elements in my conversation with you. One is what is going to be the general impact on the Japanese economy due to the COVID-19, and therefore what could happen post-COVID-19. What are the stimulus which the Japanese government has brought about, which will help tie up the difficulties of, there are some feedback coming in. May I request the admin to take care of that, please? Thank you very much. So basically the stimulus which will finally tidy up the details and the problems that the Japanese industries, workers, financial institutions are in at the moment. Then I would like to give you the context in which we always keep talking these days about Japanese companies relocating from China. So context needs to be clarified there so that we are able to be aware of what we should be doing. If the context is not clear, probably we'll be wasting our time and resources in trying to reach out to those who may not be listening to you. Very little on the strength of India and what could be the future opportunities we are looking at. So first of all, the COVID impact. There is a general feeling that COVID-19 will impact Japan as much as the global financial crisis for 2008 and 9 did. So therefore, we have to brace up for that. And that shock was not easy. In order to reach there, 2 kinds of horizons have been thought of. One horizon is that of 3 months, another horizon is that of a year. So 3 months from now and a year from now, when the COVID-19 impact on the economy lessens. And in these 2 scenarios, there are 2 different kinds of impacts on both demand side and supply side, which could be seen. So what would be these elements? One is, on the demand side, there is going to be a stagnation of domestic consumption. Again, on the demand side, there is going to be a decline in the external demand due to deterioration of overseas economies. Now, Japan is highly dependent on overseas economies. It's a big trading nation, but at the same time, it is also a big investor in the world. And therefore, if the demand side gets subdued abroad, Japanese economy also takes a hit out due to that. There is a stagnation in the trade services, such as tourism and transportation, another demand side problem. On the supply side, there is stagnation in the domestic production itself. And therefore, that will also contract the economy to some extent. Then there are disruptions in the supply chain. This is what was being talked about by my predecessors who spoke before me. And finally, the logistical disruptions which